Dear students, good morning. Let us start the discussion on today's newspaper. It is 30th January 2018. The first article, recovery will lift growth to 7 to 7.5%. Now, most of the articles in today's paper, these are related to economic survey. So let us focus majorly on the discussion related to economic survey. So with regard to economic growth, for this financial year, it was expected to be around 6.75%. For the next coming year, it was projected at 7 to 7.5%. So, what are the positives and negatives that can be seen over here? The first is, after demonetization and GST, there was a slump, and the impact of these two is getting stabilized now. And the second thing, on the other side, the inflation expectations are rising. These are majorly due to rise in oil prices, and the stock market is expected to go for correction. The reason is the company's earnings are decreasing and the company's stock prices are rising. There is a huge gap that is establishing between the two. Because of this, we can expect some correction soon with regard to stock markets. These are the two cautions given by the economic survey. And further to that, it stresses on a renewed focus on education and agriculture in India. And the next aspect, government has curbed inflation. Kovind, President of India, in his annual address to Parliament, has stated that the government is able to tackle fiscal deficit, inflation, and also it is focusing on bringing in women empowerment through triple talaq bill for Muslims. And he also pitched for simultaneous elections. These are the major things with regard to President's speech is concerned. Now, let's continue the discussion on economic survey. Taxpayer count rises post GST. So the rise is by about 50%. What is the reason? Let's take, there is a big buyer. So this big buyer, a corporate company, wants to buy from a trader who has got the GST number. The reason is, if he buys from a trader who do not have GST number, obviously he will not get the input credit. So it means that the small traders are forced to take the GST number now. So that is the major reason for rise in this tax levels or GST registration levels. Time to change monetary stance. You know that inflation targeting, the government gave the inflation target of 4 plus or minus 2% for RBI. Now the inflation expectation is close to 6%. So it means that RBI has to shift from neutral monetary policy stance to tightening of monetary policy. What is meant by this tightening of monetary policy? Interest rates shall increase. And this rise in interest rates can decrease the demand and it can lead to decreased inflation. So that's what Mr. Arvind Subramanian is talking about. CEA cautions investors on stocks touching record heights. As I told to you before, the profits of the corporate companies are nosediving, but however stock prices are going up. So it means that there is a huge gulf between the reality and speculation. So, at some point of time, they have to see a downward slide. That's what the article talks about. India needs 4.5 trillion for infrastructure. The infrastructure bottlenecks are the major reason for India to lose its competitive advantage. So, in this context, out of 4.5 trillions, India is expected to mobilize around 3.9 trillion. And the gap is expected to be around 526 billion by 2040. And then there is a massive underinvestment recently. What are the reasons for this? The PPP system, public-private partnership, is collapsing. Most of the infrastructure projects, these are facing twin balance sheet syndrome. And then land clearances, environmental clearances, these are all making the infrastructure projects difficult to move forward. They are creating difficulty for them to move forward. So in this context, easing norms for the infrastructure projects, that's what has been suggested. And then China, South Korea are the leaders in shipbuilding industry. India can also develop its capabilities in shipbuilding industry. It has expressed concern about the railways. Due to non-competitive pricing, the railways is losing its freight market to the road transport. That is what is expressed. And the telecom sector is going through crisis. The major reason is the price war, huge cost of the spectrum, and added to that, increasing debt of the telecom companies. So, the telecom companies or telecom sector needs consolidation in India. This is what this article talks about. Tax litigation taking toll on economy. So, you know that the income tax department is the largest litigant before the courts. And most of the times, in 85% of the cases, income tax department is losing this. So in this context, the Supreme Court has established a separate bench on the tax litigation. And other courts in India can also follow this rule. In these circumstances, creation of subject matter benches such as income tax benches, indirect tax benches, etc. can be much helpful for the speedy resolution of the tax related litigation. Eliminate embedded taxes to boost exports. Why these embedded taxes are existing in India? Now GST is not applied on products such as oil, electricity, which are intermediaries in production. Because of this, we can't take any input credit on the expenditure made on these goods. So it is increasing the cost and ultimate burden is going to the consumer. So the competitiveness of Indian industry is also being lost because of these embedded taxes. The production is growing high. So these have to be eliminated. And the next is, the economic survey also talks about national logistical policy. So greater transparency and efficiency in logistics are necessary to ensure the better functioning of exports. And it specifically spoke about state-specific exports. Maharashtra, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka and Telangana. Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Telangana. This is what is the order among the states that are doing excellent on the exports. And one more point, there is no concentration of exports by firms in India. It means there is no wide differences across the export firms in the country. So it means there is no superstars concerned with the exports in India. That's what it talks about. And then SMEs hold key to revive investments. The fall in savings rate and poor credit growth in the banks. This is leading to the fall in investment rate. So one of the major engines necessary for economic growth is private investment. So the private investment revival is very critical. So in this context, economic survey clearly states that there has to be a greater focus with regard to small and medium enterprises. For this, what we have to do, and the tax regime has to be stable. And then environmental and other clearances have to be made simple and transparent. This is what is the suggestion it gives. Now, continuing the economic survey, climate change may hit farmers' income. So the economic survey expects that the farmers' income could get affected to the tune of 20 to 25%. So what is the solution it suggests for better irrigation facilities? And the second is the household cash savings dipped to 50%. So previously Indians used to save in the form of cash. After demonetization, Indians are more investing in financial assets. That's a positive development. It is leading to the growth of mutual fund market in the country. India is spending on science below economic capacity. So let us see this article. India, as of now, spending only 0.5% of GDP on science. And scientific temper, creative spirit of the individual is necessary for economic growth. So in this context, the China has spent around 1%. USA has spent 2.5% of GDP when they are at the stage of economic growth in India. It means when per capita GDP of these countries was equivalent to India, so they spent 1% of GDP and 2.5% of GDP respectively. So, but India as of now is spending only 0.5% that need to be improved. Next is farm sector sees feminization. Now, rural to urban migration is increasing and the migration is generally by male. So, obviously the farm production need to be taken by the female at home. That's why the feminization of agriculture is happening. So it has definite advantages. You know that the sustainable agriculture is possible through feminization. But however, the social structure is not very favorable. The land holdings majorly are in the name of the men in the family. So in this context, the agricultural credit and providing for other farm assistance to the female members is very essential to improve the situation. Need to revisit shops for renewables. You know that the prices of renewables have come down drastically. It means energy mix of India is going to change in the future. So the renewables is going to come to forefront over thermal energy. So it may affect the thermal energy and the price of renewables may be lower than thermal energy. So non-performance assets of the banks which can increase in energy sector, especially in the loans which are given to thermal energy. That's what this article talks about. Incidence of open defecation falls sharply. Now, the open defecation is leading to loss of life and major health risks. It is a major reason for child malnutrition. So World Bank has stated that India is losing around 6% of the growth due to lack of proper sanitation. So this need to be immediately arrested. So because of the Swachh Bharat mission, it is stated that the open defecation has come down from 55 crores to 25 crores. And then address rent control vacancy. Now Government of India has a target that is housing for all by 2022. So the survey advises that the rent control and then predictability of ownership rights, these have to be addressed first before going for ownership of the housing to the people. The reason is Indian population is in a highly fluid mode. It means the mobility and migration has increased. In these circumstances, availability of the houses for rental markets need to be effective. So that's why low cost rental markets that will ensure greater mobility, both vertical and horizontal mobility of the individuals. That's why the rent control policies need to be effective. That's what the economic survey talks about. Now, frequent polls a burden. The President of India. You know that BJP government is pushing for frequent polls or simultaneous polls. So there are specific advantages because of this. One is national governments are expected to gain, national parties are expected to gain through simultaneous polls. And second is the simultaneous polls are also advantageous from the reason that they decrease the governance and related burden. It means whenever the polls are announced, entire governance machinery has to shift towards election mode. It is affecting the welfare of the people. That's what is the major government's argument over here. But however, in the existing constitutional framework, it is neither feasible nor advisable. Unless you reform or unless you change Article 356 of the Constitution or bring in fixed tenure for the houses, lower houses, we cannot ensure the simultaneous elections. That's what we need to understand. Now, this is walking with others on a tightrope. It is about the philosophy of Gandhiji. Now, I need a better understanding, especially in this area. So, I'm going to consult a teacher who is an expert on Gandhian studies. Then I will make an article on this, or I'll make a video on this article. As of now, my understanding is not complete related to this article. A path to executive power. This article is related to office of profit. You know that any position under the executive held by a legislative member can be considered as an office of profit unless legislature by law excludes that. So parliamentary secretaries is a frequent route the executive is taking to offer various benefits to the legislative members. So 91st Amendment Act it has created a limit on the number of ministers that can exist in a government. So the limit is 15% of the strength of the lower house. In these circumstances, to provide for more berths, the governments across the states are resorting to parliamentary secretary positions. So in this context, the office of profit is a clear conflict of interest for a legislative member to hold the government accountable. And in these circumstances, the conflict of interest, if it has to be reduced, there has to be a clear restriction on the parliamentary secretaries. That's what this article talks about. It also states that the office of profit is against to the philosophy of separation of powers. Cautious optimism. This is about economic survey. Though economic survey projects 7 to 7.5% of growth for India in the next fiscal, it also raises a caution with regard to the stock markets and rising oil prices. That's what this article talks in essence. 3 milestones in education. Now, if you talk about ACER report this year, annual status of education report, which was given by Pradham Foundation, it has majorly focused on the children between the 14 to 18 years of age and the learning outcomes. So the learning outcomes are still poor in India. And another report which has come for the first time in India released by the government that is called National Achievement Survey. The modalities how these are being brought in are different. So the National Achievement Survey, it was done at the district level. So there is a lot of data related to learning outcomes at the district level. So in this context, this makes us possible to understand how a decentralized approach in improving the district outcomes can be made possible. So in this, a special fund can be created which can be provided based on the project given by a particular district. So we can implement a specific project related to learning outcomes in a decentralized manner through a special fund which is created by the union government. That is, this article is recommending. And pixelating the India profile. This is about how economic survey is being developed and economic survey is more coming into classrooms and is being studied as a textbook now. So after Arvind Subramanian became the chief economic the advisor, he has improved the quality of economic survey and also the big data is effectively used to understand different patterns of Indian economy functioning. So this has got great academic relevance now. And also to train the teachers on economic survey, they are using massive open online courses. So these are all positive developments. And then in the last page, I gave you the notes that will be available to you at laix.in/civilsprep. Thank you very much and all the best.